Greetings and welcome back. We are now in chapter 4, part 2 of our study of world civilization. This is the imperial fringes in Western Afro-Eurasia. In the first chapter of Paul's letter to the Romans, he strongly implies a built-in awareness in the human soul of the possibility of some type of supreme architect. Recently, I was reading a book titled "The Season of the Witch: How the Occult Saved Rock and Roll." And interesting book, but a couple things that stood out to me in reading that book was that when you think about the occult, it's not necessarily all about black magic and boards, although it can be about that. But it's generally about folks attempting to find God on their own terms. And it's an interesting read, but I guess what amazed me about that was how popular religion is in the world of rock and roll, and it seems to have been that way for since the 60s, since the mid 60s. And of course, that book talks about how that quest changed everything from album covers to time limits of songs and so forth. But it just amazed me how popular religion is, and it's something that one probably would attribute to, and with the rock and roll field, licentious living, right, et cetera, et cetera. And even today, religion is looked at in secular circles. Political beliefs and planks are tied to some old, maybe old. You can find old pagan religion in some of those things. Certainly in environmental circles, perhaps. And I say all that to say this quest to make sense out of existence is not an interest that went out of fashion in the 1960s. And leading to the section, back to the section we're going to be taking a look at, we're going to see here the formation of two of today's leading world religions. So turn to page 132 or 182 in your books. And as you guys know, I like the visual stuff when we can incorporate it. And let's take a look at where we're going. We want to analyze the relationships between empires and the peoples on their peripheries in Southwest Asia, South Asia, and East Asia. And we want to evaluate the connection between the empires and war, religion, and trade in Southwest Asia and East Asia. Major heads-up terms here for this section: the sea peoples. These are migrants from the north of the Mediterranean who happen to invade cities of Egypt and Asia Minor. The Phoenicians, an ethnic group in Eastern Mediterranean region, known for their ships, trading, and alphabet, and referred to in the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament as Christians recognize. They're referred to there as Canaanites. You may be familiar with that. The term Phoenician is Greek for the purple people. For the purple people, yes, derives from the major trade good they manufactured. It was a rare and expensive purple dye, right? It was sought after. Alphabet. Turn this down here. Alphabet, a Phoenician system of writing based on relatively few letters, 22 of them, that combined to make sounds and words adaptable to many languages. And the alphabet was simpler and more flexible than writing based on symbols for syllables and ideas. Monotheism, the belief in only one God. Um, the Vedas, these are rituals and hymns and other explanatory texts composed and orally transmitted in Sanskrit by Brahmin priests, and they helped shape the society and religious rituals of the Vedic peoples and became central texts in Hinduism. The Varna, this is Sanskrit for color, refers to the four ranked social groups within early Vedic society. Your priests and warriors, your commoners, and your laborers. Ties into what would come later as the kind of the social hierarchy in modern day India. The term, or the caste system, right? The caste system, the term caste, which derives from the term caste. We're dealing with race and breed in Spanish and Portuguese, and is a later anachronistic term often used for these divisions. The Upanishads, first millennium Vedic wisdom literature in the form of a dialogue between students and teacher. Together with the Vedas, they brought a cultural and spiritual unity to much of South Asia. The mandate of heaven, right? The mandate of heaven, religious ideology established by Zhao leaders in modern day China to communicate legitimate transfer and retention of royal power as the will of their supreme God. The mandate later became Chinese political doctrine. Just a little background here before we get going on the PowerPoint notes. Just South Asia becomes more culturally integrated during this time period we're going to take a look at, despite the absence of a strong centralized political authority. The Zhao dynasty establishes loose political integration in East Asia. And despite the rise of empires, smaller populations on the western fringe of Afro-Eurasia retained their own language, beliefs, and system of rule. And let me stop my share here and get our first set of notes on here. There we go. Imperial fringes in Western Afro-Eurasia. Get my trusty side panel up there. There we go. For those of you who need to see me. Some people need to see the person who's doing the lecturing, which is fine with me. The Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples emerged from Central Europe, and they moved along the Danube River, which goes up into Europe toward the Black Sea from about 1200 BC, following the rapid rise of their population and the development of local resources, namely iron. They were able to use maritime warfare and iron weapons to conquer the Hittite Empire and then attack the Egyptians before settling on the southern coast of Southwest Asia, where they were later known as Philistines. There they shook the social order of the Minoans on Crete, and they were later depicted as warrior heroes in the 8th century Greek epic poem, the Iliad, which was, historians were formally convinced it was written by Homer. Not so sure anymore, but the Iliad, right, as we know, is a legitimate piece of literature. In the Mycenaean culture and the Minoan culture on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean. And on page 184, no, not 184. I was going to show you something there, but it's not where I wanted to go. Let's take a look at the Greeks, right? On the Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean, the Greeks arose on the fringe of Persia's empire, where for the most part they resisted the empire's claims to their islands and land. In about 499 BC, Greek city-states joined with other Mediterranean peoples to revolt against the Persians. And in 490, the Persian invasion of the Greek mainland was repulsed at the Battle of Marathon. Athens emerges in this period as a major sea power, employing the advanced technology of trieme battleships, battleships with the big masts on it. I wanted to get a photo on that, and I forgot to get that up there. But in 480, at the Battle of Salamis, these naval forces repulsed the Persian invasion, part of a longer pattern of Persia losing ground to the Greeks for the next 150 years in that Aegean Sea area. And on your maps, we looked at that last time, the Aegean Sea, off to the east of the Aegean Sea, which became what we know as Asia Minor. And we will be discussing that a little later on in the course as well. The Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, known as the Canaanites in the Bible, the Phoenicians, to use the Greek term, were an important maritime people in the Eastern Mediterranean. These people specialized in opening new markets to trade rather than subduing foreign people, okay? They maintained the autonomy of their smaller territory by supplying exotic luxury products to the Neo-Assyrian kings from their ideal seat that they had out on the sea. So the Phoenicians could both build both ships, and from large inland cedar forests, they were able to build those and then trade this precious metal. And you can see map 4.4, and there was a map I wanted to get to here soon for you guys to look at, map 4.4, and that is on page 186. All right, map 1.4. You can stop and take a look at that. The Phoenicians were also successful because of their innovations in shipbuilding and seafaring, which enabled them to trade across the southern and western rims of the sea, where they developed ports that could ship inland products. So they were able to compete with the Greeks in this large space. And then from the 8th century BC, they employed an alphabet, which significantly simplified communication among educated people, who therefore would not need to depend on scribes. On page 187, you can see the Phoenician alphabet. And I would emphasize reading the caption, right? Very interesting caption there, describing, giving you further analysis on the Phoenician alphabet. The Israelites. And you could look at map 4.4 for this as well. To the south of the Phoenicians, between the sea and the desert, the Israelites emerged as another micro society extending to the borderlands with Egypt. Now, their stories of their people emphasize their origins in Mesopotamia, off to the east, and but also with connections to Egypt in the west. A local culture emerged in present-day Israel between 1200, 1000 BC, leading to a kingdom under King David and his successor in around 1000 to 960 BC, his son Solomon, from 960 to 930. And it's around this time, too, that the Hebrew people are known to become Jews. This was based around a great temple to a superior god, Yahweh, that the latter built. But Israel broke apart into two kingdoms after the death of Solomon. However, this was a period in which belief moved from worship of many gods to monotheism, led by a series of prophets who asserted the new faith, right? So the Torah emerges as a collection of books that's served as a contact between and a contract, really, contact and a contract between believers and their God, which would have a lasting impact as the Jewish people migrated across Afro-Eurasia. Now, this emergence of monotheism, and I don't use this term lightly, it was revolutionary for this time period. The other element to Hebrew monotheism was the relationship to the people, to their God. And this was revolutionary too, that the Hebrew God was not tied to nature as the other gods were. For example, if one was to draw a picture of an Egyptian god or a Mesopotamian god, one would be equating it with geography, forces of nature, whereas the Hebrew God, if you were to try to draw it on a canvas, you would probably, be left with a blank canvas. The other thing too that was revolutionary about the Hebrew God was that his contract with his people was in a loving relationship. It wasn't fear-based. Again, so very revolutionary was the monotheism of the Hebrews, the Israelites. Okay. Look at the foundations of Vedic culture. And you could turn to map 4.5, I suppose, at this juncture. The Vedic peoples, they settled down. The men and women who migrated into the northern lands of South Asia were they were illiterate. They were chariot riding and cattle keeping pastoral people who they lacked the experiences of city life and urban life, but they brought with them much beloved elaborate rituals, mainly articulated in hymns called Vedas, Sanskrit for wisdom or knowledge, which they retained as they entered a radically different environment in which they relied on to provide a foundation, if you will, for assimilating new ways, transmitted orally, but eventually gets written down in Sanskrit. So these Vedic hymns reflect earlier lives on the plains of Central Asia, and were infused with images, again, of animals and gods. For example, in some of these Vedic poems, storms kind of gallop across the heavens, and thunder sounds like the neigh of horses. Vedic elites, with their pastoral nomadic roots, really never lost their passion for fine horses, and they create trading routes. I think this is interesting. They create trading routes to the northwest beyond the Hindu Kush to maintain a supply of these horses. Again, you can check out map 4.5 over on page 191. Some scenes from a complex set of symbols and script that emerges out of the Sanskrit. Unity through the Vedas and the Upanishads. During the middle of the first millennium, some thinkers, mostly Brahmin ascetics dwelling in forests, felt that these Vedic rituals no longer provided satisfactory answers to many of the questions of, a rapidly changing society. The result was a collection of works known as the Upanishads, or the supreme knowledge, which expanded the Vedic cultural system. So taking the form of dialogues between disciples and a sage, the Upanishads offered insights into the ideal social order. The Upanishads teach that people are not separate from each other, but belong to a cosmic universe called Brahma. While the physical world is always changing and is filled with chaos and illusion, Atman, the eternal being, exists in all peoples and creatures. Atman's presence in each living being makes all creatures part of this universal soul. So although all living beings must die, Atman guarantees eternal life, ensuring that souls are reborn and transmigrate in the new lives. So the cycle continues with humans as they are reborn, either as humans or as other living creatures like cows, insects, or plants. And not to be facetious, the Indians in India, they are one of the top 3 cattle producing regions, nations in the world. And there's oftentimes famines in certain areas there. And, a lot of people in the West wonder, well, why don't you just eat the cattle that you massively export? Again, not to be facetious, to the Hindus, you could be eating someone, right? You could be eating, a human that is, someone that's reborn as a cow. The early Zhao Empire. The early Zhao Empire, we're getting into modern day China now. And you can turn to map 4-6. And you can take a look at that. Zhao peoples under King Wu defeated the Shang in 1045 BC. A lot of integration through the dynastic institutions, and Zhao innovations contribute to cultural and political development. Here's map 4-6. And the early Zhao expansion. Having defeated the Shang, let's see where I want to go. Copy the Shangs. Here we go. Having defeated the Shang and established the Zhao control in northwestern China, and you can look at your map, page 4-6. King Wu, right? King Wu, and yeah, I do want to go back up here. I want to go back up to King Wu here, and his successors expanded north toward the Yangtze River Valley, which we've looked at before, seeking to retain the allegiance of the lords of older states and to gain support of new lords whom they appointed in these annexed areas. So the Zhao Zhao kings rewarded their political supporters with lands that they could pass on to their descendants. So as the Zhao expanded their territory, their new colonies often consisted of these garrison towns where Zhao colonizers lived, and it was surrounded by fields that were inhabited by local farmers. And as under the Shang, the Zhao regional lords supplied military forces as needed. Who paid tribute and appeared at the imperial court to pledge their continuing allegiance. Over on page 195, there is a 17th century AD painting on silk, right? It recalls the memory of a pivotal Zhao king, Emperor Mu Wang, and riding in a chariot driven by a legendary charioteer. It's interesting artwork there. Mandate of Heaven. In addition to promoting a Chinese ethnic and political identity and cultivating advances in architecture, Zhao rulers introduced a long enduring concept of the Mandate of Heaven, which provided a justification for their rule. Attributed by later Chinese intellectuals to King Wu's younger brother, Zhao Gong, often referred to as the Duke of Zhao. The mandate asserted that Zhao moral superiority justified taking over the Shang and their wealth and their territories, and that heaven therefore had imposed a moral mandate on them, right, to replace the Shang, whom they characterized as evil men, whose policies brought pain to the people through waste and corruption, and return to good governance to the people. So as the Zhao leaders presented the Mandate of Heaven as a religious compact between the Zhao people and their supreme sky god in heaven, but over time, the Zhao kings and their court detached the concept from the sky god and made the mandate into a free standing Chinese political doctrine. social and economic controls. You have hierarchical social structures of nobility, occupational groups, and family structures. Uh, uh, Patrilineal society with strict hierarchies for men and women. In that patrilineal society, I think I touched on this maybe a couple of chapters back, that when the man and woman get married, the couple goes where the male family is, right? Patrilineal society. Limits and decline of Zhao power. The power of the Zhao royal house over its regional lords declined in the 9th and 8th centuries BC. In response, the Zhao court at Hao introduced ritual reforms with grandiose ceremonies featuring larger standardized bronze vessels. Even this move really couldn't reverse the regime's growing political weakness in dealing with its neighbors coming down from the steppes, which forced the Zhao to flee their western capital, in fact, ushering in the beginning of what would come to be known as the Spring and Autumn period of Eastern Zhao dynasty, centered at Lui, modern Luang. So the Zhao dynastic period, like the Shang before them, was later idealized by the Chinese historians as the golden age of wise kings and officials. In fact, the Zhao model of government culture and society became actually the standard for later generations. Though the Neo-Assyrian and Persian superpowers were capable of greater expansion during this period, China was sowing the seeds of a durable state. Demographic organizers. We'll recap even last week and kind of put a wrap on chapter 4. Last time we were looking at the forces of upheaval and the rise of early empires through climate change, prolonged drought, soil exhaustion, Neo-Assyrian administrative techniques. You had roads and garrisons and relay stations, and then empires in Southwest Asia, New Assyria, Neo-Assyria, and the Persian Empire. Neo-Assyrians forcibly relocated conquered people, right? Forcibly making them work. Women lived in highly restricted lives under complete patriarchal control, probably not too much different from what we just looked at with the Chinese. Neo-Assyria becomes unstable, discontent among nobles, and civil war. Imperial fringes in Western Afro-Eurasia, which we looked at today. Well, actually, let me go back. Persians. The Persians built a multicultural empire, and Zoroastrianism it was major religion. And then we looked at today Western fringes in Western Afro-Eurasia. The Athenians defeat the Persians. Themistocles was a big war hero there. Darius ruled Persia, combining central and local rule, does not force customs on the conquered. Judah becomes successor state to the Israelite kingdom, David and Solomon's kingdom, and the Phoenicians developed cuneiform writing. Cuneiform writing, which we took a look at, and then monotheism develops slowly with resistance. The foundations of the Vedic culture in South Asia, the 4 Vedas, and the Vedic people established the trading routes to obtain horses. Vedic Upanishads, collection of works of social order. And then the early Zhao Empire in East Asia, reformed rituals with grandiose ceremonies to make up for lost prestige. Early Zal state sought balance between local lords and central authority, and the mandates of heaven, Zal's system of political legitimacy. Okay, what's up ahead? For those of you who learn independently, there you have your as you read 182 to 198, take you through the section, PowerPoint section that I just showed you. I got a video called Peoples on the Periphery, talking about these regions we talked about today. You have your graphic organizer there. Review quiz. Your review quiz will be up and ready to go on Wednesday. I think I'm going to keep that up through Sunday. I had said I was going to close it out after Thursday, but I think I'll just open it up on Wednesday and keep it there through Sunday. Friday, your initial post is due, and then Sunday, your 2 response posts. Monday, I was looking, I'll be honest with you, I teach live at another institution, and I know our fall break is on the 11th and 12th of October. And I was thinking, all right, Mount Aloysius is on 11th and 12th too. I just was assuming that. And I looked just very recently, I thought, when is their fall break? And it was a Shazam moment. You guys are not until the 15th. So I thought, I pushed your exam back to the 13th so you can have a fall break. Then I thought, well, we'll just keep it at the 11th, right? We'll keep it. I'll move it back to the 11th. That way I can get more in that week for chapter 5. I want to get into chapter 5 as soon as possible. So in light of that, your lecture for chapter 5 material will be on Tuesday. You'll be able to get that on Tuesday. Probably a little bit of a shorter week for part 1. I'm not sure, as I'm talking now, how I'm going to do the discussion questions. I think I'm going to maybe give you guys the review quiz that week, and the as you read for part 1 and the lecture for that, and then maybe save all that for the following week with part 2 for the discussion question part. So more on that later, kind of thinking out loud here. The test, all right, the test is broken up by chapters. You will have options in which questions to answer, right? Certain sections will ask you to answer 3 questions out of 6, right, which is good. Maybe more familiar with some things. And primarily it'll be multiple choice questions, some short answers, and then there'll be a map question at the end, okay? Just a heads up on the test. Okay. So there you have it. Any questions or comments? Don't be afraid to ask. Like I said, I have a live stuff I do during the day. I am checking during the day, but I probably really going to be able to get the things more or less during the evenings. So, but anyway, there you have it. Chapter 4, part 2. Okay. You guys have a great week, and study well for that test too, test 1, right? Go back over your review quizzes and all the correct answers, and everything should be related. Okay. So, all right. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.